Hello and welcome back to the Resleevables Prophecy Edition. I am your host, Patrick Sullivan, joined by Magic Hall of Famer and Pro Tour champion Patrick Chapin. And we're finally paying off the last of our debt here.
Dude, I mean, Prophecy is a very special Magic the Gathering set.
Yeah.
They don't make them like that anymore.
No, and as someone who has a lot of nostalgia for early Magic, and I think the design sensibilities of, let's say, Arabian Nights are really underrated in a historical sense, because you look at it in 2025 sensibilities and it's a lot of nonsense, whatever. But if you look at the innovations from Alpha to Arabian Nights, to me, it's fascinating, stunning how much is there. Not all of the old sets have this level of nostalgia for me, nor are they things that I point to as design sensibilities that Magic could use more of today. Prophecy is such a set.
So I might be in a weird camp, but I do have a bit of nostalgia with Prophecy. Not necessarily exactly because of it being, a well-designed Magic the Gathering set. I did have a lot of fun with Prophecy, and I had a lot of fun playing Magic in that era. And it does remind me of a lot of good times. It wasn't when I was focused on Magic the most, however, and I think I probably would have soured on Prophecy if I had to play with it more than, like, say, just, pre-releases and Pro Tours.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a few gems in there. Prophecy's the kind of set that I think if you just, like, scrape out if you just extract what are some of the, like, ideas that were there, and you don't worry about the execution. Like, if you're allowed to just get rid of the half of ideas that are among the worst in the history of Magic, and you don't judge based on the execution, I think that there's some value to be. I also think it's one of the best sets of all time as a educational, like, case study of what not to do.
Yes. My most vivid moment, because this is a point where I'm starting to ramp up as a competitive player a little bit. I've played in some PTQs. I haven't done well. Friends of mine like Eugene Harvey and Osip Levodovich are starting to, top 8 PTQs regularly. They're within striking distance of getting to the Pro Tour. So Osip shows up to the only game in town a little bit after Prophecy came out, and he's like, I built a sweet deck of standard deck. I just want to get some matches in. So I'm not playing against him. I'm watching him play. And in the first game, he resolves a Ristic Tutor. Now, I don't exactly know what was going on with his deck. And remember, this is also a time where Vampiric Tutor is still legal in standard. So this is a lot of work. But he goes on to win this game. The following game, and the following game, and the following game, and the following game, the opponent just leaves up mana, and Osip is sitting there with a Ristic Tutor in his hand, and that was the last we saw of the deck. He went 1 and X in a small sample size. Ristic Tutor was good the one time, and then once the cat was out of the bag, it went downhill pretty fast. Fooled me once. But we got a lot to get into with this set, but we'll be back here in a moment with the facts of Prophecy. Welcome back to the Facts of Prophecy, brought to you by Tales of Adventure, our first sponsor. You can find their website over at toamagic.com. And if you're on Twitter, make sure to follow the store owner at toamichael. They're the only dealer that I use now for years, and certainly with TCG Player now being a union-busting operation, there's really no excuse not to be lending your business over to Tales of Adventure. You can use promo code Resleevables at checkout for 5% off of all of your orders. All orders placed inside the United States come with free tracking and shipping. And if you're going to the Magic Fest in Las Vegas in June, they're going to have a huge presence there, and they have the option to just have your order picked up on site. So if you're in Vegas, make sure to drop by and say hi. Tales of Adventure Eternal lives here. Now, Prophecy is the 20th Magic the Gathering expansion released on June 5th, 2000. The pre-release was May 27th, 2000, and the pre-release promo was a foil. Do you know this one? This one I actually didn't know.
Is it Scoria Cat?
Avatar of Hope.
Oh, right. Yeah. I remember that, actually.
The design lead was William Jokic with contributions from Bill Rose and Mark Rosewater. It was lead developed by Charlie Catino. Now, funny thing here, after his last name was misspelled as Catino in an earlier rulebook, Charlie intentionally had his name misspelled as a joke on future sets. For Prophecy, his name was listed as Charlie Hasbrino. Mike Elliott, William Jokic, Paul Peterson, Henry Stern, T. Wynn Woodruff, and contributions from Beth Morrison. Still an all-star team here, even though the output here was maybe not so good. Look, you can change a good idea ever so slightly and it becomes a bad idea. And this is a team responsible for a lot of good ideas.
Totally. Are you talking about like the initial design team or the final design team?
Both.
Okay. Yeah, it's not a shortage of talent that's the issue with this at all, you know?
Yeah.
Besides, at a meta level, it's kind of sweet that there's like a set that's like, you look at it and you're like, these are a bunch of the cards that I wrote when I was in class pretending to take notes and I was just like making up cards when I was just like 14.
Yeah.
These are a bunch of those designs.
Yes. Art direction by Dana Knudsen and Ron Spears. The set contains 143 black border cards, 44 rares, 44 uncommons, and 55 commons. This is still before Mythic Rares were a thing.
This set would have been a good set for Mythic Rares, though. It's got
for sure, yeah.
Nice Mythics, actually.
The set expansion symbol is a cluster of crystals. Third set in Masques Block is the first booster set to use the smaller shooting star design on foil cards. The set was sold in a few ways, 15 card boosters, we know those. One illustration on all the boosters, which was Avatar of Hope.
Where was the Avatar of Woe promo? Because that was like a big thing. I don't know.
I don't know.
I just had it.
Is it a JSS thing?
I don't know.
Is this a Berenstein Bears thing? Because I also remember it, but now that you're mentioning it, I don't know the source.
I mean, I know I had foil Avatar of Woes. Was it a Pro Tour?
I don't think they did that.
I don't know. I had some kind of promo Avatar of Woe. We'll figure it out.
And we have again the 4 60-card pre-constructed decks. All right, so deck lists: Distress, white and black. Rivals will barely have time to suffer when you put the Distress deck into action. It employs cards with fading that work quickly, so be sure to strike early and often. And this is a collection of white and black cards with no theme or synergy. It's got some of the glittering creatures.
Fading not being in the set.
Correct.
Got it.
All right.
A strong show of strength that, just a strong, well, honestly, just an indictment. But
okay. Pummel. Mono green. The bigger they come, the harder they fall on your opponent. That's the basic idea of the Pummel deck, with some of the most powerful Prophecy brutes waiting for thumping to happen. It's got some blasted germs, thank God.
Again, not a Prophecy card.
No. Next up, Slither. Red and green. The competition won't see you coming when you creep up with your Slither deck. The moment you tap out of mana, some of your most insidious monsters jump into action. I really like this billing because of all the cards that you can see coming, they're the cards that say when all your lands are tapped, now it has more power and toughness or whatever. And again, we have 4 Silk Crawlers. That's nice. Scoria Cats, to tap out.
A version of this deck ended up being played in Standard, right?
Yes. Yeah.
There you go.
I really like the Invigorates here. That's a nice little bit of deck building. You tap out so much.
Once again, not Prophecy.
No, of course not. But, I want to give credit where credit's due. We're going to be straining here a little bit. Turnaround, white and blue. The opposition will only think they have you cornered when suddenly your turnaround deck kicks in. Spell Shaper cards thwart their worst attacks until your beasties get in their last licks.
Your beasties?
Yeah.
Got it.
So, again, we have a blue-white deck with no real theme or any sort of synergies. It does feature Vegeta the Lion. Probably not a card I would want to put in front of players playing for the first time.
It's inspiring. Maybe if all the other decks just have a ton of removal. Mm-hmm. I don't know. That's a dope card, though. It's one of the highlights of the set.
Yes. There's also, of course, the Fat Packs.
Nice.
6 booster packs, 2 premium cards, the Top Deck Magazine Prophecy pullout section, and the Prophecy novel. Do you have it looked like maybe you wanted to jump in on something with the turnaround deck.
No, No, I think you described its strategy quite nicely.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, that's...
I also think a card... I'm not so sure that McGee to the Lion's a problem for new players because, like... Okay, so, you know, like, if you had a card that's just going to, like, lock the other person out...
Yep.
McGee to the Lion is not a thing that locks the other person out if you don't know what... Like, if you don't know what you're doing...
No, that's true.
It doesn't automatically drive itself. And I kind of imagine that I bet the gameplay might not be that bad as far as, you know, that kind of thing goes. Like, as far as, like, you know, angels that just lock your opponent out forever, blinding angels or Abashans or whatever, you could do a lot worse.
Yeah. The deck also contains Waterfront Bouncer, however. So I don't know.
That's another one though. It stacks in the same way of
it is true. You've only got so many cards in your hand.
You got to learn a valuable lesson about whether to play cards or discard them.
Well, we got more of that coming here with the mechanics of Prophecy. Welcome back to the Resleevables Prophecy Edition. This is the mechanics section sponsored by Dragon Shield. Dragon Shield, just number one in the business for sleeves, binders, deck boxes, all supplies you need to protect and transport your cards. You can go over to dragonshield.com and find anything that you're looking for your collection. And if you use promo code Resleevables at checkout, case sensitive, all lowercase, you get 5% off of all of your orders. And if you don't want to go to dragonshield.com, your LGS, I guarantee you, has this stuff in stock. So thank you to Dragon Shield for sponsoring this section of the show. Mechanics, similar to Mercadian Masques. Prophecy contains no new mechanics. It did continue.
Keywords anyway.
Yeah. Mercadian Masques has things that you would say are mechanics, like rebels and mercenaries. There's a through line there.
The Ristic mechanic, I would consider to be a mechanic.
Yes. Now, Nemesis had fading, which is actually a keyword. It has rules text.
Or an ability word anyway.
Yeah, at least something. But Prophecy is like Mercadian Masques in that sense. It did continue the themes of rebels and mercenaries and even introduce some anti-rebel and anti-mercenary tech in the form of these 4 cards. Brutal Suppression, Root Cage, Rebel Informer, Mercenary Informer. I remember the Informers being a big part of block constructed metagame. That was an influential thing that came up.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that both Rebel and Mercenary Informer had, like, relevance, you know.
Something.
I mean, in part, being able to, like, you know, use it as such a recursive kill condition and a recursive, you know, advantage, I shouldn't say, could kill creatures, you know.
Yeah. So the Rebel...
And got to make sure you don't get decked.
So the Informers are both Rebels and Mercenaries. Beyond that, we have some new Rebels in Reveille Squad, Shield Dancer, Soul Charmer, Sword Dancer, and Trenching Steed. New Mercenaries... Agent of Shauku, Bog Glider, Death Charmer, and Pit Raptor.
Dude, I'm a Bog Glider sympathizer. Well, we'll get to that because that's one of my cards. Bog Glider, I'm an advocate for the Bog Glider.
Okay. Ristic, while not a mechanic, was featured heavily in Prophecy. The concept of Ristic magic offered cheaper or discounted cards and abilities with the downside that they were weakened or didn't work at all if a player paid some amount of mana. So some of these are explicitly Ristic, and then some of these I would say have sort of a Ristic kicker to them. We have Ristic Circle, Ristic Shield, Soul Charmer, Ristic Deluge, Ristic Scrying, Ristic Study, Shrouded Serpent, Withdraw, Death Charmer, Flay, Nakaya's Shade, Plague Fiend, Ristic Siphon, Ristic Tutor, Ristic Lighting, Wild Might, and Ristic Cave.
There is a lot of space to be had with your card doesn't work if your opponent pays any mana.
So I would split these up into 2 camps where you have the withdraws and the Ristic Lightnings of the world that do a thing and then you get something else if your opponent can't pay.
Right, versus the Ristic Tutors.
Which is literally like nothing happens if they have the mana up.
They spend 2 mana.
Yeah. I think the first, I think both of these executions are quite bad. I think the first one is at least tolerable.
Absolutely.
And the second one is well below an acceptable line.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the second one, I can imagine very easily, once you have the first one, wanting to have one individual instance of the second one and being really smart about picking your spot. It's a weird thing to do as a mechanic like a load bearing beam. But as a one-off, you could talk yourself into it.
Sure.
Still dubious, but
the other theme from the set is sacrificing lands / gaining benefits from having no untapped lands. Many cards offer ways to use untapped lands without taking mana burn. This was to encourage players to tap out so other players could play their risky spells or abilities. 20 cards in the set have the phrase sacrifice a land on them, which is roughly 14% of the card file.
And I think it's notable how well it actually works with one of the secret other mechanics of the set, which is the avatars and the winds.
Mm-hmm.
I think that making really compelling 8 and 9 cost cards is interesting if you're also giving people spell shapers and ways to sacrifice their land and incentives to not have extra land.
Yeah, at least it gives you an out if you're not into the set mechanic, right?
And it adds even more tension.
Oh, yeah. The set is not light on tension.
No.
That's it for the mechanics. We'll be back here in a moment with the cycles.
I mean, yeah, I guess a lot of the other stuff is cycles, but
yeah,
because it does feel when you play with it that there are mechanics.
It's a coherent file. Like it's not random.
Not at all.
As opposed to, like, let's say Homelands. Homelands is kind of a random assortment of cards.
And it's got a lot of words that don't do anything.
Yeah. This is not that.
No.
But we'll be back in a moment with the cycles of prophecy. Welcome back to the Resleevables Prophecy Edition. Up next is the cycles, brought to you by Bosch and Roll. That's Bosch and Roll over on YouTube. That's Brian Koval's channel, where he is streaming Eternal formats 5 days a week. On top of that, if you are going to places like Eternal Weekend or LobsterCon, you're looking to level up your local legacy or vintage game, there's no one better in the business than Brian Koval. Extremely skilled, won a bunch of tournaments in paper and online in these formats. So if you're looking to level up your game or just have a good time watching someone stream Eternal formats, make sure to check out Bosch and Roll, Brian Koval's channel. Now, set has 17 cycles.
Which is down from some of the previous
Yes.
Mercadian sets.
All right, first cycle. The avatars. Rare avatar creatures that cost 6 and 2 of their color with a static ability that reduces their cost by 6 if certain conditions are met. Avatar of Might, Avatar of Fury, Avatar of Woe, Avatar of Will, and Avatar of Hope. These bang. These were sweet. And I was working at the only game in town during this time, and Avatar of Woe was probably the first card that I was like around for the initial printing, where people walked into the store that I had never seen before, asked if we had Avatar of Woe, and then we did or we didn't, and we sold it to them or we didn't, and then we never saw that person again. That was the first one. I think the first one in Magic's history that I was told about was Sliver Queen, but Avatar of Woe had that kind of pop to it. The other avatars, not so much, but still a very sweet cycle, I think. We have the winds. Rare instants or sorceries that cost 9 mana and have splashy effects. Blessing Wind, Denying Wind, Plague Wind, Searing Wind, and Vitalizing Wind.
The original ultimatatiums.
Yeah, that's absolutely. I had not made that comparison before, but you're right. I'm a little disappointed here with the fact that Plague Wind and Avatar of Woe are both relatively similar and are also by far the most powerful and appealing of each of the individual designs. Would have been nice to space it out a little bit here, I think.
Yeah, but also Avatar of Woe and Plague Wind are such bangers and hits.
Mm-hmm.
You got to take your wins where you can in this, and they don't really play the same.
No,
and they're a good combo.
Yeah, I mean, once you're casting them, then
I really think that they succeeded in these. I think that a little bit of some of the wins are a little phoned in.
Mm-hmm.
The avatars, there's a real artistry. You got to judge it by the standards of the late 90s, early 2000s era of when they were designed. But I really think this is one of the reasons I think this set is not a 1. Really? I think that these are. You think this set's a 1?
Well, yeah, we'll get to the gray when we get to the gray.
Yeah.
But no, these are they redeem the set in a lot of respects.
They are somewhat redeeming. It's hard to put too much redeeming into 10 of your highest rarity cards.
Sure.
Like the amount that it's going to show up. And it's not like all the wins and all the avatars actually in practice are that. I mean, the avatars, the conditions are so different, but we are talking about some like ginormous win the game threats, and then all the wins just win the game. So we are talking about some. It's not like there's the most nuanced gameplay before the wins get played.
Sure. All right, we have the uncommon pitch spells. Instants and sorceries that cost no mana if you discard a land of its corresponding color, and foil has an additional cost here. Abolish, foil, outbreak, flame shot, and snag.
So I do think it is impressive how many pitch spells they made in this block that play all right or play well. I do think it probably would have been better for the game and there'd be more fun had by the world if these were spaced out over like 5 years or 7 years. There's a real diminishing returns. It's not like the gameplay stacks really well when you're like, what is the 65th pitch spell in the format?
Well, that's true. I do appreciate it though in Prophecy because you have so much of this. Are your lands untapped or not? You make some mana.
100%.
And this
But that doesn't change that they made 35 of them in the first set and 15 more in the, you know.
Right. I wish Prophecy had more of it and the other sets had less. Doesn't really matter. I mean, you're straining a little bit here towards the end.
In particular, stuff like if all that gush stuff had been here where you're like, oh, look, I have less land now because of gush. Or I gushed and now, and not just gush, but all of that kind of thing. I thwarted and gushed and dazed and now I don't have the mana to pay for heuristic cards.
Right. I actually I think it would be better, the set would be better, or block would be better structured with these up front and then the pick up your land stuff here. Because that actually is, you know, speaking to the thing. I like Abolish a lot as a design specifically, just because of, I don't know how intentional it was, but specifically because of Rising Waters being on top of things. This is really a spot where you would value a 0 mana disenchant.
Absolutely. This was also during a period where there was a lot of stuff, whether it's Winter Orb, even, it sounds weird, but even Armageddon. When your opponent's playing Armageddon, it's actually like, it's nice being able to abolish and hit their icy or whatever.
Yeah. That gets us to the legendary Spell Shapers. Rare 3/3 Spell Shaper creatures that cost 5 and require paying a cost and discarding 2 cards to activate. Also, again, legends: Vegeta the Lion, Alexi Zephyr Mage, Griel Mind Raker, Latula, Keldon Overseer, and Jolreal Empress of Beasts. Any of these stand out to you as being especially well or poorly designed?
I mean, I like this cycle a lot.
Okay.
I like the cycle a lot. I think this is another one. I mean, that's one of the rares in this set really do it for me. And I think that these, it doesn't mean that this is the perfect batch out the box. And there's all kinds of feedback I could give on, you know, like maybe they don't all need to be 3/3s. Maybe you can actually have real bodies on them or a keyword. But at the end of the day, I think that as far as these go, they succeed much better than most of the Spell Shapers. And they're one of the things I think is actually, I mean, it can be frustrating to lose to a repeatable effect, of course. But I think this is actually one of the things that works the best in the entire set.
Jolreal is one of my favorite designs in the set, specifically. That's one where it's like, first of all, there's incentive to do it both ways, depending on what's going on. And if you're doing it to your opponent with the intent of playing some sort of sweeper, that's also going to get rid of Jolreal. So at least we kind of move on with things. And it's naturally, the more engaged in combat your opponent is, the weaker the second and third and fourth activation is if you're doing it to yourself. And if your opponent's engaging in combat, it's likely getting less powerful because your lands are going away in the process of them attacking and blocking. So that one to me is also like kind of the issue with these is they're varying degrees of lockouts depending on the circumstances and at different rates. And this is one where it's kind of like the game has the possibility of keep continuing to go in a way that's different because of the impact of the card. So I think that one.
The red one also, right?
The red one's a lot of just like fireball you, untap fireball you.
But the game's getting over with. It's changing.
That's true.
I just mean that we're not like Vegeta the Lion has some really good gameplay at times, and it's obviously powerful compared to the other ones. But it can be among the most excruciating and boring and just invalidate everything else that the whole thing was about.
Yeah.
And really, really put a spotlight on how much during this era of Magic, they were not printing very much playable removal at all.
When my 1 year at Seton Hall University, I was desperate to play some Magic while I was up there. There wasn't a card shop that I knew of in South Orange. And, this is still, it's 2000. It's not pre-internet, but it's not as ubiquitous as it is now. So I'm just like trying to find a game anywhere. I find a group of people playing in the cafeteria. It is, a multiplayer game. It's Commander essentially, but without a commander and, however many people were in the game. So I just had my Masques Block PTQ deck with me, and I was like, okay, sweet. I know this is probably not going to be for me long term, but at least I can get some games in. And I Choi Mano's Blessing to Majida the Lion, and 37 turns later won the game, and I was told that I could not come back. We have the any player enchantments, global enchantments with abilities any player can activate. These are sort of Squallmongers Part 2. Samite Sanctuary, Evacuation, and Bringer's Revel, and Task Mage Assembly.
I don't know. I don't really think this adds very much to the world.
All right. Oh, we have something good here. Flash auras. Common auras named after a legendary creature with flash before it was known as flash. Majida's Boon, Alexi's Cloak, Griel's Caress, Latula's Orders, and Jolrial's Favor. Sweet. These are fun.
Yeah.
And I do like flash in the context of the set.
It's not like this is new, though. This is a thing they'd already done about.
Oh, sure. But it's particularly juicy here because it changes the dynamic. Instance changes the dynamic of do you have lands untapped or not?
Right.
And can you pay mana or not in response to your heuristic spell?
Absolutely.
So there's really good gameplay here.
Well, there is gameplay here, and it improves the fundamental conceit.
Yes. Field auras. Uncommon auras that enchant lands, giving them activated abilities. Flowering Field, Sunken Field, Noxious Field, Barbed Field, and Verdant Field.
Again, I think that this is a thing it's like many things in this, it's like a bunch of different things in this set. It is actually surprisingly well executed for being ill-conceived.
Yes.
Because I think that it's not trivial to put together a good package of repeatable enchantment effect. Like if you're in the world of prophecy, like this era of Magic, it wasn't like nowadays you can just give people access to tons of enchantment removal incidentally on one of the 3 modes, or the legendary creature has it as an activated, there's so much access to niche forms of interaction. But in this era, there was not. There was a real shortage of ways for people to be able to just play with removal of any particular type. And as a result, repeatable effects are very dangerous and very difficult and challenging to balance in this world. Mm-hmm. And I think that the fields added compelling gameplay, especially to draft, and they added a dimension to a world that really needed another dimension. And there were some interactions, and there was, as far as repeatable, hard to interact with, advantage engines go, they were surprisingly well executed.
It's tough to get these kind of cards, in my opinion, to land the right way because the disadvantage that enchant lands have versus enchanting creatures or enchanting other permanents is you're rarely changing the texture of the permanent very much. Like with any sort of creature enchantment, you obviously care about the characteristics of the creature you're putting the enchantment onto. Because if it has, numbers or certain keywords, there's a force multiplier with other numbers and keywords. And these kind of cards typically don't have that. That said, I think these play pretty well for what they are. And you have the context here, I guess, of what's the land I value the most because I want to be sacrificing my other lands to stuff versus what's the land I value the least because I'm leaning into the activated ability and I want to put it on my least valuable resource.
Well, there's a bunch of emergent gameplay. Like if I attack and you use your field in order to affect combat, you now have less mana so that my Ristic card works.
Yes.
And, that is emergent gameplay. And it's illustrative of how much this set has some conceits that once you live in the world where you have those conceits, they worked really hard to make the best of those conceits. It's just so bizarre of a collection of conceits to be designing around.
Yes. Yeah. Which gets back to kind of like, well, there's a pretty talented design and development team. And the mistake is the one up front, which is we're going to do a set that's about Ristic and blowing up all your own lands and tapping out or not being tapped out or whatever.
Which is interesting with all the pitch spells in Mask,
But once you accept that conceit, there's a lot of like kind of novel stuff going on here. Just the conceit is incredibly bad. Speaking of ability losing creatures, common creatures that have abilities that can be removed if a player pays a cost.
Oh my god.
Glittering
commons.
Glittering Lynx, Ribbon Snake, Plague Fiend, Zarapa Minotaur, and Vintara Elephant.
Dude, I literally at the Pro Tour just ate Ribbon Snakes.
Yeah.
Like, just my opponent attacks and I guess it loses flying.
You're not going to believe this if you're younger or even relatively old, but Ribbon Snake was a player in Block Constructed. Because a 2/3 flyer was good enough, and if your opponent ever made the mistake of using the ability and then you resolve Rising Waters, and that was that.
Dude, there are some moments I remember of like I attack with the Ribbon Snake and my opponent, like, I have to play it dumb. Like, I have to convey how much I just am a noob, right? And then they can't help themselves and they pay the mana tapping out, so they can't use the trick they have. So they've paid the mana, and now they're going to have their superior, their Magita the Lion or whatever. Magita the Lion's going to eat my Ribbon Snake for free. But now they're tapped out, and I get to use my pump spell. Mm-hmm. I get to use my Flash or whatever, and then my life is just so good, and that's some good times. There's some real good times to be had there.
All right.
It's not that replayable.
It's not. No untapped land creatures. Creatures that get a bonus if the controller has no untapped lands. Fenstalker, Keldon Berserker, and Vintara Snapper. Sacrifice 2 land creatures. Rare and uncommon creatures with activated abilities that require sacrificing 2 lands. Jeweled Spirit, Coffin Puppets, Keldon Arsonist, and Squirrel Wrangler.
I like these a lot more than a bunch of the other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this stuff involving sacrifice 2 lands and discard 2 cards, activated abilities where you're paying a cost that you're not naturally accruing faster than the activation of, it plays different. It ends up being something that isn't just this all the time at a greater rate, Mm-hmm. And I think that, like, Squirrel Wrangler is a lot more compelling than a lot of these. It's a little weird doing these and spell shapers. Like, what are we kind of doing here? But I guess you get to modulate how much mana you have left over. But I do think that this is a pretty decent way to do this,
Yeah. Glittering Cats, we have a vertical cycle. So the Lynx cuts in both directions. White cat creatures with static abilities that prevent all damage that would be dealt to them. An activated ability that can be activated by any player that removes the ability until end of turn. Glittering Lynx and Glittering Lion. Something with some personality. Spike-tail Drakes. Blue Drake creatures with activated abilities to sacrifice them to counter a spell unless its controller pays an amount of mana. We have the Hatchling and the Drake. These are kind of sweet.
Absolutely love these, and it's just a shame to not have the rare.
Yeah.
Like, you got to finish the cycle right here.
Right.
It's at least start with the 1, 2, 3. The 2, like the 2 cost 1, 1, and anyway.
They play all right on their own.
They do.
And again, we're in a Ristic world.
Yes.
Where there's like multi-dimensional implications of these things being played.
This is such an attractive design by itself that also makes sense in this context, and you can take it out of this context and it's still appealing.
Yeah.
And the gameplay is actually, it's a thing. There's a real thing that goes along with using this kind of stuff and your opponent actually making the choice of whether or not to pay. And it's not as trivial as just like, obviously, whenever you're force spiking, and if you can,
And these might look modest compared to sort of the modern
quite good.
modern analogs. It's worth noting here that these can target any spells. Most of the more powerful, the Mausoleum Wanderers of the world that you might be more familiar with now, those are typically negates. This can tag creatures too.
I mean, this card was great when it came out. It was an instant player.
Yep. Black upkeep creatures. Black creatures that require the controller to pay a cost during the upkeep or sacrifice them. Whip Stitched Zombie, Pit Raptor, and Bog Elemental. Brutal. Double-sized creatures. Red creatures that double their base power and toughness if the controller has no untapped lands. Spur Grappler and Scoria Cat. Spur Grappler actually weirdly above curve for the era. Oh god, these. Red Brawlers. Red soldier creatures that can't attack if the defending player controls an untapped land and can't block if its controller has an untapped land.
This is like the flailing stuff where it's like there's just an era where they're like, we need to have a vertical cycle of unplayable red cards that don't work.
They can't, or whatever. Like, they either can't attack or block or they kill themselves.
It's a bizarre well to have to go to so much.
Branded Brawlers and Veteran Brawlers. Veteran Brawlers was another one where, like, that was, Osip and the Heuristic Tutor. This was my Heuristic Tutor. Good lord, did I try.
Yeah.
Because you can talk yourself into they leave up 1 mana and then you Stone Rain them and it's lights out. And it is that 15% of the time. But the other 85 is not that. All right, Wells. Artifacts with triggered abilities that happen if the controller has no untapped land.
It's a loose use of the term cycle.
Well of Life and Well of Discovery.
These are just some cards.
I think when it's 2 or more in a set that is small,
think 2 is a cycle.
They both say well. It's a pair. Call that a pair.
I mean, you can call it whatever you want. I'm just saying. But yes, in case you need to draw cards or gain life,
Yep.
But no, they're fine. They're fine.
That does it for the cycles. Back in a moment with the trivia of prophecy. All right, trivia time, folks. Prophecy, Resleevable edition. Mark Rosewater wrote, quote, "Prophecy was, in my opinion, one of the all-time lows of design.
True.
My pick for second worst design set after Homelands, but it did demonstrate some things not to do with a third set."
He's exactly right. I don't know what that's trivia, but that is a insightful quote that I would meditate on if I did not yet understand the content of that quote. Mm-hmm. That is, and I do agree with him on if we're talking about initial design. Okay. Like I think that from an initial design standpoint, it is the second worst initial design set behind Homelands.
You think it's worse than Homelands?
I do. From an initial design standpoint.
Or sorry, you think Homelands is worse?
Yes. I think Homelands is worse if we're talking about initial design. I'm not talking about the world building. I think the world building of Homelands, there's a lot to like. But I think that from a initial design standpoint, Homelands is unquestionably. I think Homelands is in a different tier.
Really?
I think Homelands is the worst initial design set in Magic, bar none. Distance between yes.
I want to marinate on that a little bit because I would put Prophecy as last by a lot and then Homeland second.
Interesting. Oh, to me it is not confusing to me that it is clear that Homelands is last place. It is much more interesting to consider what are the other cards or what are the other sets that are even near Prophecy for second place, because I think that probably the distance between Prophecy and third place is assuredly smaller than the distance between Homelands and Prophecy.
Very interesting. Okay. I'll give you why basically the foundation of why I give it to Prophecy.
Yeah.
Imagine that this was alpha.
Okay.
I think this is more catastrophic than if Homelands was alpha. Like the cards that compose this don't result in anything fun happening. The fact that just playing with just Prophecy cards,
I mean, I played in a Prophecy pre-release, and I'm not saying the set was fun. I think it's the second worst initial design set ever, but I think that like there is fun to be had. I think that but keep going. I want to make sure I'm not missing your point.
So I think Homelands is the failing of Homelands is the absence of initial design. There's nothing there. There's just some cards, and then on top of that, the rate is really bad, and there's a lot of unappealing stuff going on, and whatever. There's all those issues. Here, it's like this is to me fundamentally not what Magic is or should be.
I think there's a game going on here. I think it's poor, it's unwise, but there is fun gameplay. I mean, yeah, a whole bunch of the cards, like there's 15 of the cards that don't even work. Get it, but you're not going to keep playing with the cards that don't work. You figure it out. If you get frustrated, you put your whatever card down, and you're like, I'm not going to keep playing with this. It doesn't work. But there's actual gameplay that emerges. Homelands is excruciating. It's not even Portal at its worst day. Like Portal, it's so devoid of it's so devoid of any essence of gameplay. And in fact, you become so starved for any words to mean anything that you are searching. And every time you encounter words that say anything, it's both confusing and eventually you arrive at this also does nothing. Mm-hmm. There's just cards that don't have any words on them and cards that eventually you noodle through the words and figure out they also do nothing. And that's not even remotely there's a game, at least with Prophecy, there's a game. It's poorly conceived, but it's the most fun thing about Homelands from an initial design, and we do have to separate, by the way, the final design and initial design.
Yep.
Because for instance, I think there is fun gameplay when your Singer Bat gets a Feast of the Unicorn. Mm-hmm. You're having some fun.
Yeah. That
wasn't the initial. I mean, maybe those were even submitted initial, but that's not even interesting really from a card file standpoint. But the part of the problem with Homelands is that what's fun is imagining that the cards are something else. I had a lot of fun with Homelands writing, using Homelands cards and then just writing stuff on it and using the Homelands card as the card I wrote on to make interesting designs.
You turned your Folka Van Hava into a Birds of Paradise proxy or whatever?
I don't even mean, no, I made up cards.
Oh, okay.
I just made custom cards on, there's all this stuff where it's obviously you're not going to do this stuff. I would make up stuff I would imagine what a Rini Singer would do if I wanted, to design a card that was fun or interesting. I
think that I feel there's a little bit of a distortion insofar as I think the final design of Prophecy is so much better than Homelands that it is a confusing element of how it interacts with the initial design. Something that Prophecy does very well, in my opinion, is the relative. Now it's a very, very weak set, but the most powerful cards in the set are generally pretty fun. They do kind of track 1-to-1, and the stuff that's miserable is on the weaker side, generally speaking. Homelands does not have the benefit of any, it's almost like no one ever made the set, I guess is the...
Yeah, I mean, so the history of how Homelands became Homelands is a story for another day, but definitely the development of Prophecy is much better than the development of Homelands.
Yeah.
And if what you care about in initial design, if what you care about is... if you're going to compare the two sets and you're which one is more poorly conceived, which one is less wise fundamentally, without question, Prophecy is way less wise fundamentally. That's not the metric that I think is the most important. I think it's very important, but I think that it's more important of, if you just use, if you just pulled out, if you had a bunch of words and you just pulled them out at random and that was your card file, almost every random collection of words you would pull out is it's garbage. It's noise. Yeah. It's almost nothing. And Homelands is the closest by so great of an amount to that, where there are, and thank God most of the cards didn't pull out random words, because the collections of random words are unspeakably Like it's like brain rot to read them, you know. Prophecy is unwise, but once you go down that path, there is an artistry to it.
Sure. Yeah.
And I don't just mean the development side.
Totally.
And I also, if you look at the redeeming qualities of prophecy, there's a bunch of stuff that was made in initial design. And whatever the numbers end up being, it's whatever. But like the avatars and the winds and some legends with text boxes that actually matter. There's something there. There's some egregious, offensive, unwise mistakes. But there are a bunch of good ideas. Homelands is so utterly devoid of good ideas that the most compelling aspects of it are where you randomly, like for instance, Singerbat, Feast of the Unicorn, Isan Shade, you get that stuff at random. None of those have anything going on at all. That's literally, if you just pull stuff at random, we're going to randomly generate costs, randomly generate whatever stuff that already existed with no coding, no implementation. You do randomly arrive at 1/2 flying lifelink. I guess like that's one of the things you could, or, you know, like you could be like, oh, I have a, I guess, pro white and nothing else. Like that's what I do. I'm a 5/5 pro white. Why not? But that's not like, you didn't do anything.
Yeah.
You can just randomly. Fair. So to me, Homelands is so bad. Homelands is worse than random. Whereas Prophecy is unwise.
Okay.
Anyway, I don't mean to
I'm thinking about this because I would almost describe it as my intuition is almost the opposite.
Oh, how about here's a question for you. If you were
like Prophecy is like Homelands is random and Prophecy is worse than random.
Oh, no. I think Homelands is worse than random.
Okay.
Because I think that a lot of the stuff is random, but it's clamped. It wasn't even bold enough.
Yeah.
So Prophecy, the gameplay, the stuff going on, you don't get that purely at random.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. There's
you never get
intentionality.
that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you were to look at a design test from two different people, and one of them submits to you Homelands, I made this. This is what I think a Magic set should look like. And the other one's like, Prophecy, I made this. This is what I think a Magic set should look like. Which of those two, from an initial design standpoint, you're going to hire an initial designer. Which of those two is moving to the next round? The one who submits to you the Homelands file or the one who submits to you the Prophecy file?
It depends on their age. If I'm hiring, like, I understand you don't actually do this, but in my hypothetical, if I was hiring a 12-year-old, definitely Prophecy. That shows a spark and inspiration that just needs to be massaged. If it was a 25-year-old, neither of them are moving on for sure.
Well, you have to pick one. Obviously, you're picking Prophecy because you're like, okay, well, you clearly don't have good sensibilities, but you made the avatars and the winds and the Empress or the Megiddo. Like, you got some ideas.
Okay, that's fair. That's
right.
Fair.
Like, there's some ideas of value.
Okay. Yeah,
I'm not talking about which set do you think you'd.
I'm trying to pull apart sort of like those cycles, the avatars and wind, which are excellent. Those are great.
Right.
And then the core mechanic and gameplay of the set.
Yeah, but when you're evaluating initial design, most of the design ideas are going to be bad, right? Like, wouldn't you way rather a designer shows you 8 bad ideas and 2 great ones than like 10 good ones?
For sure. Yeah.
So
that's fair. It's fair.
And I'm not saying Homelands has 10 good ones. I'm not saying Homelands has 10 good designs.
I'm trying to think of like what are the actual good designs now in Homelands.
And
Autumn
it
Willow.
becomes so difficult. It becomes so difficult if you don't let yourself just cheat and be like, oh, the best designs are all the ones that have no abilities.
Spectral Bears, I guess.
Spectral Bears is for sure a top 10 design in Homelands.
Yeah. Okay. I'm leaning towards being persuaded. I want to think about this a little bit more.
Yeah. Either way, Prophecy is fraught with peril. It is an ill-conceived notion.
All right, that gets us to our notable cards here in white. We have Avatar of Hope, banger. the nuts, and Magita the Lion, which, you know, it's not ideal gameplay wise, but it is actually...
I'm sympathetic.
Yeah. Okay.
I'd be way more sympathetic. I mean, it was frustrating at the time, but it was most frustrating because of the lack of quality interaction in other colors.
Mm-hmm.
As far as this thing goes, Magita the Lion is a much less frustrating thing than like being locked out by Shard Phoenix, for instance.
So something that I do appreciate about Magita the Lion is like the level 1 thing is, oh, it's Wrath of God. Obviously, I just play this as my only creature, and then I'm doing it, right? But how it actually works in practice is, well, now your opponent's removal is live, where otherwise wouldn't be. And so Magita the Lion actually ends up showing up in decks like Rebels, let's say in Block Constructed, where my opponent's removal is taxed in other ways. And this is a very powerful option for me to have. It's not the totality of my gameplay, but having things to do with my mana and things to do with cards in my hand that I can do actually plays pretty well with the Rebel chain. And so even though it's on a surface level, Wrath of God, surface level, it looks like Wrath of God. In practice, it was actually much more
tactical.
The home of decks that were playing with other creatures and trying to get an edge in creature mirrors.
Absolutely.
Cool. Blue, Avatar of Will, banger. Foil. What are your thoughts here on foil?
So I mean, I guess if we're, I mean, what do you mean my thoughts? Give me a context. Like on foil as a design, foil in the same block as when they already did thwart, foil this way of doing this sort of a thing?
That. As far as like a pitch counterspell goes.
I think it's fine. I think that if you're going to do this sort of thing, I especially love paying the costs of 2 instead of just 1.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that holding an island to potentially foil is secretly costing you more than it looks like it does on the surface. And I think that foil is costing only 4, where you can actually backup plan it. Like, there's a lot to like about the gameplay of foil.
Yeah.
And I think that thwart is cool too, but thwart is different, and there's more fun to be had from thwart, but there's less unfun to be had from foil.
Right. I think even though on the surface they look like very similar designs and they clearly pair together in a way that's very powerful, I think thwart is so much better at shoving your own stuff through, and foil's a lot better at defending yourself. I'm tapping out for something big with thwart backup is really powerful. That comes up a lot. Foil is like, it is actually, like it can have the moment of pushing something through, but having the sheer amount of resources to have something that good to do and then have your 3 cards left over, one of which has to be an island, is a lot more particular. If you look at Force of Will as sort of, it's sort of an even distribution of protecting yourself and pushing something through. I think thwart is way tilted in the first direction and foil is way tilted in the second direction.
I also think that it's not nothing, the amount of fun of feeling like you did it, being clever with Gush and Daze and like getting your island back.
Yeah.
Like, I think that it makes those cards, and it's weird because even though it works really well, there's a little illusion going on there.
Yes.
Like when you Gush and then foil.
Yeah, it's like that can be really good if you already have some other stuff going on.
Which rewards you for being proactive and not just sitting around doing nothing.
Yeah.
And I think that the gameplay of foil is also quite good when there are things like a way to look at your opponent's hand and see that they don't have an island right now. And then it's the next turn. Did they draw one or not?
Right.
And
would they have played it anyway if they drew it because maybe there's other priorities?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a fan of foil. There's a lot you could do different, and I think that probably more of the awkwardness comes from thwart, but I like foil.
Yeah, I won a PTQ once with Psychotog where I really got oh wow, thwart is like actually better than Force of Will in this deck a lot of the time. One was casting Upheaval with thwart backup. That's pretty gross, and then just thwart anything and now kill you with Psychotog because I have so many cards in my hand. And you can't really do this stuff the same way with foil. I mean, you can a little bit, but it's much harder, much more situational.
I won Type 1 World Championships with foil. Like, I believe, I don't recall for sure. I think I don't remember. I think I only had one copy. Maybe I had two, but 4 copies of Force of Will, 4 Misdirection, playing Miracle Grow.
Gotcha. Okay.
With 4 Land Grant, 4 Tropical Island, 4 Island, 4 Gush. But that was nice. Foil in Vintage that's a hot one.
Yeah, it also means you mean it, and you got islands in your deck. It's pretty sweet. I also want to give a little bit of additional, I wouldn't say trivia, but why this card is noteworthy for me. I know with the way that Magic's released now, there's a million different variants and treatments and whatever comes in different sets that makes the act of uploading a set onto your website to buy singles really laborious. This was the first card I was pissed off about. It's like, don't call a card the premium treatment. This sucks. It makes it harder to search. And then like a foil, like, come on, not great. Ristic Study, a nightmare. I can't believe, I'm sorry. I'm not like a Commander. I can't believe this is still legal in Commander. What are we doing here?
Why not? We're playing Commander.
It's a miserable collusion fest.
I don't know, man. I feel like you might be not the target audience. How much are you going to play Commander if they ban Ristic Study?
Definitely more, because when I was playing Commander, again, I've told this before. I had a job that required going out to England. Some people at the studio in England, they were Commander players. They were like, "Oh, let's get you in here," or whatever. And Arthur, spikiest guy of the bunch, Ristic Study in all of his decks. And eventually I had some success in bullying him to the point where that was no longer much of a feature of the games. But it definitely soured me on the experience.
So what's the question?
Why is this legal?
Why not?
It seems like it's not improving anyone's life and exacerbates issues of constant triggers, constant priority points, the ability to collude.
So I don't think that this is like the kind of thing you want to be good in a competitive format. But I don't know that Commander needs to be so stressed about such things. And I think that, I really question this notion that somehow the problem facing Commander today is a collusion fest. Is it? Is that who's asking for that solution? Because you're playing a multiplayer game that is synthetic diplomacy. It is always collusion. It's a more than 2-player game.
Okay.
That's part of the game.
I think collusion is a matter of degree.
100%. And that's why this is legal, is because this is on a side of the line that the community is enjoying enough to have it be part of the acceptable range of how much negotiation there is. There are lots of Commander cards that do this. Like when you have cards that make somebody else's creature have to attack somebody or get a bonus for not attacking you, collusion fest. When you have a card that the drawback is that you also give 2 other people an advantage, but you get to choose which ones, collusion fest. But I think that's actually just using the word collusion wrong. It's not collusion. Fundamentally, collusion involves circumventing whatever the fundamental conceit is in order to clandestinely gain an advantage, where you are, or to rig the outcome so that you are playing a different game than the other people have consented to. I think that with Ristic Study, clearly this is the game you've consented to.
I think that's really well said. And I think, thank God no one out there plays Commander for stakes.
There are people who do.
No, I know, that's the joke. It's like all of the things they're saying are true if it's just like we're all kind of sitting around, Dorito dust on our hands and whatever. Once they're talking about like there's tiebreakers, whatever, it doesn't matter.
Wait, dude, you're not back on the CEDH. Don't worry about all that stuff, man. Let people have their fun. Let people have their fun.
All right, Spytail Hatchling. Already spoke about this one. Great. In black.
I got to tell you, by the way,
what?
A young man, I derived a lot of fun from thinking about Ristic Study.
Fair.
Like just imagining, and this was in competitive, imagining the experience of Ristic Study. Like I was the type of guy who would just fantasize about casting Wheel of Fortune or Time Twister when there's a Ristic Study in play.
Mm-hmm. But now we don't have to imagine about that stuff anymore because it's been around for 25 years. So
I already thought about it. Okay. I don't need to keep thinking about it.
All right. Black. Avatar of Woe and Plague Wind. 2 bangers. Talked about these earlier. I want to give a shout out as a notable card. It doesn't look like much, but it actually was pretty influential at the time. Chilling Apparition. Because this was at the era of Dark Ritual is still legal in Standard and in Block, but we're mindful about what can you really push out on turn 1. Like the format was balanced around Dark Ritual is legal, Hypnotic Spectre is not. That's kind of the place that we're at. And this was actually like, as far as things in Block constructed to do, this was like people did Ritual this thing out. Like it was kind of the best thing to be doing in Block if you really wanted to play with Dark Ritual.
Sure.
These decks weren't good. I'm just saying.
I don't know.
This was the attempt of like, can we make a Hypnotic Spectre?
How old were you in the year 2000?
That is the year I was 18 when this set came out.
What an innocent,
wide-eyed,
people
did it. I'm just saying people did it, and I want to give it a little love. Red, Avatar Fury, noble cards here, pretty lean. Green, Avatar of Might, Artifact, very influential. Chimeric Idol.
This list of notable cards, I feel like there's some notable cards that we have not talked about.
Then talk about them.
Well, I want to talk about when we can do the awards because it's going to come up anyway.
Okay, great.
I'm just saying, I want to make sure that it's clear. There's more notable cards than on the top level notable.
Definitely.
It takes a sophisticated palate to enjoy such delicacies.
Okay. Chimeric Idol. Huge part in Block Constructed, even though this was just really a drawback.
No,
for the decks that were playing
no.
it.
This Dodge Wrath of God and stuff.
No. I'm saying like the fact that it was an artifact creature that wasn't up on your opponent's turn was most of the value here. It wasn't like decks were leveraging the now I'm tapped out and XYZ happens.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah. It was just basically a costing mechanism on this thing, but it was a huge player in Block and in Standard at the time. And I think plays pretty well.
I think so too.
Yeah.
And we're talking about, there was a long period of time where 3/3 for 3 was somewhat above rate.
People played with Silkcrawler.
People played with Gnarled Mass.
Right. Yes. Different time. But yeah, Chimeric Idol was a hugely influential card. And last on the notable cards, one near and dear to my heart, the land section, Ristic Cave. So you know how I talked earlier about like, you turn it doesn't take much to turn a good idea into a bad idea. There's more bad ideas than good ideas.
Yeah, I also think it's almost the opposite way where almost every idea is bad by default, and it can take a lot to make a bad idea into a good idea. But
there are game design studios that I worked at where I had a stack of foil Ristic Caves, and I would give one to the new hire to remind them that most designs are bad. I think this required rules errata because it doesn't function in the rules as written.
That's correct. Yeah, it just doesn't work.
And then, when it works, but it does. There's like 2 levels on which it doesn't work.
There's at least 2. I would say there's 3 levels on which it doesn't work. It doesn't. First of all, it didn't work when they shipped it because it just wasn't coherent with the rules.
Yep.
But then they patched it, so then it merely doesn't work because they pay a mana.
Right.
However, it also doesn't work because its rate is so bad.
Yes. It's a trifecta.
Yeah, it is. I think it is, I don't want to jump ahead, but spoiler, this one gets my vote for biggest design failing.
Interesting.
Not just because of it as a card, it's the embodiment of it, but the entire Ristic mechanic is actually the failing. This is simply the worst design. It is the embodiment. It is the epitome. It is by far the worst, most egregious example.
Well, and also, I would actually add a 4th thing to it, all that list that you just had, which is this is a particular design where you are really sensitive to the thing working when you want it to work. Like a 5-color land is the most like when I'm signing up for this, whatever the drawback is, it's because I'm really valuing the ability to make red mana on turn 1 and green mana on turn 2. And the fact that this doesn't do that at all is so bad.
I would also go further and say that this is the most anti-fun. The gameplay, it's not like there's even like a dream, right? Like, and then when you're actually doing this, the amount of operations it adds to both players, the mental burden, the physical burden, the time burden, for what?
Right.
For what? For what are we doing?
I don't even know what you're trying to do with your Ristic Cave. I just know that it's good for me to stop you from making a mana if I can.
And I think that the amount of anti-fun, and what's worse is the amount of people who all did it.
Yeah.
The novices who would do this, and then eventually they'd have to figure out that this isn't what they really want. But the whole world, like there's some things that when you figure out you don't really want, you can have some fun in the meantime. The Ristic thing, you and your opponent are just involved in accounting.
Right.
For nothing.
For nothing.
And it's a very poorly conceived trap to lay for people.
So if you wanted to do something like Ristic Cave, you could talk me into something. Again, if we're in the conceit that we're doing prophecy and we're, Ristic is the thing, whatever. A land that was like tap for a colorless, and then you pay 1 or I gain 1 life. Okay. Now it's like, it's not interfering with the core ability of me to play my spells or not. The incentive isn't nearly as perverse for you to also be doing nothing.
See, I just think that that's still adding all the operations management so poorly. I think it'd be, if you, let's say you're just hell-bent on doing this kind of a thing. If you just have whatever the land is, if you want it to be 5 color, whatever version of a land, Shimmering Grotto, any kind, like you can figure out how to balance the rest of it. But the Ristic conceit, you could just do it enters the battlefield tapped unless if they pay 1.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. So like, or unless they pay 1, it'll untap. It always enters the battlefield tapped, and then it's going to untap unless they pay 1. So then we're done.
Yeah.
And it's actually cool having a land that, like, worst case scenario, you are having a tapped land. But like, if you find your spot, you can cheat the system and not have it be tapped.
Yeah.
And you can just count on your card working or not. Like you can actually anticipate, So that would be how I would do it if I was tasked with make a freaking Ristic Cave. If I was going to make Ristic Cave, and then the actual, what does it do? I don't know. You could have it be choose a color and it always makes that color. Or you can pay 1 and tap to get a color of any, and you can pay tap. You can tap to get a colorless, or you can tap and pay 1 to get a mana of any color. You can do a lot of different versions of it, but I just think you need the dramatic moment.
Well, that doesn't,
and not the recursive moment of nothing.
That does it for noteworthy or in some cases notorious cards. Back here in a moment with the awards for prophecy. All right. We're back with the awards. Again, new awards, relatively new award segment here that Chip and I cooked up. First award, strongest card in a low power setting. Your answer is?
Spiketail Hatchling.
My answer is also Spiketail Hatchling. I would have given the answer to a different card, but I needed it elsewhere.
Same.
Because we're in no repeat worlds.
Yep.
All right, second award, strongest card in a high power setting.
Yes.
Your answer is?
Foil.
Foil? Okay. My answer is Spore Frog.
Is that because you had to use foil for a different answer?
I did, but also...
You would pick Spore Frog anyway?
It's at least... It's close.
I won the Vintage World Championships with foil.
Spore Frog's value over replacement is very high. They don't do a lot of that sort of thing.
Well, they do now, but they didn't at the time.
Really, it's not... Obviously, this card is particularly strong. It's just that it's so easy to recur cheap creatures, and there's some people that get locked out by this.
Yeah, but foil's a vintage player.
Okay.
All right.
Coolest commander card. Your answer is?
What's yours first?
Task Mage Assembly.
Ristic Study. Not close. Definitely Ristic Study. Absolutely. Not even a question. For all the reasons. Whatever you're thinking of, definitely those reasons, and then also more. I am a big Ristic Study sympathizer.
I'm not negotiating with terrorists here. I'm going with Task Mage Assembly.
Dude,
obviously,
my life is so much better because Ristic Study exists. I don't want to be involved in it.
That's probably true of basically every powerful card in Magic.
No, dude, I'm saying that Ristic Study is a card that continues to pay me dividends without me being involved.
Okay.
I just keep reaping more joy from the knowledge that there are people out there engaged in the Ristic study experience.
Yeah. All right.
God bless you guys. Love it.
Favorite art? Your answer is
Avatar of Woe.
all right. Mine is Citadel of Pain. I actually think they do. There's a lot of art in the set that kind of is sort of a brutalist architecture and environmental style that I think is really fits. And in contrast to something like Wrath Cycle, it's not alien. It's not a different plane. Like it does feel like a core fantasy setting, but times are tough.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I just think when I see Avatar of Woe, the amount that it's not just that it's like a sweet cosplay, the amount that it makes me feel action, like it makes me feel like it's moving. It makes me feel like it's got a distinction that's like fun to just imagine. Like, I mean,
Arcade post banger.
absolutely.
One of the classics.
I actually struggle with this because I also think Avatar of Woe is a great design, great card for a lot of reasons, but it is definitely my favorite artwork in the set.
Okay. Biggest design successes. Now, this could mean a mechanic, a cycle, kind of, it doesn't have to be an individual card. Your answer?
Squirrel Wrangler, Megiddo the Lion, all these things that involve compelling activated abilities on creatures that inspire you, or that inspire deck building and inspire card choice and inspire gameplay, that are inspiring without being ultra drawback, and without being generally inevitably every single turn.
Yep.
And I think that you can't just Squirrel Wrangler all the time, and you can't just Megiddo the Lion all the time, not straight up anyway. And it's very challenging to make Spell Shapers. It's very challenging to make a card that lets you constant miss with buyback, you know?
Yeah.
Like whatever the sacrifice a land or to discard a card to keep recursively doing an ability, that's a hard space to mine. And I think this set does an incredible job. It does a great job. I wouldn't say it does a great job of making creatures with actual activated abilities with texture that are inspiring and lead to meaningful gameplay.
All right. I give my answer to the avatars. It's something that some of them do kind of speak to things that are going on in the set in sort of a sideways way.
Yeah.
But I do really appreciate that so many of the rares in this era are so much about just doing the same thing over and over again. What is the set's theme? And like, does this all speak to the set theme? And to the extent there are random cards sprinkled out, they're often extremely unappealing. And these are a cycle of just sweet, awesome,
extremely appealing cards.
You do not have to care about anything that's going on in the set to be interested in these.
They're appealing to Timmy, Johnny, and Spike.
Yes.
Love it.
All right. Biggest design failure. Again, this can be a cycle, a macro trend, whatever.
The Ristic experience. And Ristic Cave is the worst of them all. But the Ristic experience is so great of an abomination that it is worthy of if you're going to teach a college class on designing magic cards, there should absolutely be an important chapter about the Ristic experience.
Yes.
And it being one of the worst, what I would call a mechanic, but one of the worst design ideas to see print ever.
My answer is a little bit different, but much in the same vein of there's just too much incentive for neither player to do anything. The idea that like set aside all the other issues with Ristic that we've been talking about. Another issue with Ristic is we're playing with Prophecy. We're in block constructed or draft or whatever. And you can have Ristic cards in your hand over the course of the game that I don't know if they're there. And so a tiebreaker for me over and over again of do I play something or do I hold up my mana to do something else is, well, if Chapin's got a Ristic card in his hand, then I'm keeping him off of that too.
There was a player at one of the game stores that I played at who drafted, and I believe it was pre-release weekend, but he was drafting stuff like 4 or 5, like 4 Ristic circles, 38 planes, and that was his deck.
Brutal.
And that was his deck. He's just like, what is in your deck? Like, if all your cards are creatures or land, and you have any removal, if you have anything, and then we would both just sit there, and you're like, well, you're not cutting, the rates are so slow, and everything's so slow. and and would win some games.
Yeah. Horrible. All right. Next up, card you've won the most with. Your answer is.
So my real answer would be foil, but since we can't talk about that, there's a different real answer that's defensible, which is Fault Riders.
Ooh.
Yeah.
You want to tell some people at home about that one? They have no context for that.
I mean, so if we're going to go on just the sheer number of games, I played Fault Riders in draft a lot.
Yeah.
And I won a lot of games on the strength of Fault Riders. Win to Fault Rider, win not. And when my opponents would Fault Rider, when they would not. But when I would Fault Rider, the amount of I'm going to attack and then not do it, or I'm going to attack and do it, and the amount of setting up, I mean, the texture of the games, I really enjoyed sculpting the,
This is sort of shades of your conversation a couple episodes ago about Wishmonger. You won both a lot because you played it, and also won a lot because your opponent played it.
There was a lot of that going on in that era. There were a lot of these were not self-driving cards.
My answer is foil. This was the point at which I started like kind of being good on the local level, played a lot of mono blue control, and foil was a huge part of that.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer because foil's definitely the best.
Card you've lost the most to. Your answer is?
Ristic Lightning.
Okay. Yeah.
Although my real answer is probably also foil. But give it, Ristic Lightning, I definitely got Ristic Lightninged by people who were really winning with their Blastoderms and Saproling Burst and Yavimaya, Fires Yavimaya, but...
My answer is Chimeric Idol, because Prophecy is probably the peak of multiply how much Magic was I playing by how bad was I, and this is probably the top line of that era, and Chimeric Idol gave me the business. A lot of times my removal didn't work, a lot of times, it just... that card taught me a lot of very painful but valuable lessons. Design with the most wasted potential.
What's yours?
My answer is Wintermoon Mesa.
Why? What's the potential you're seeing in it?
Do anything else. Like, for two reasons. One is the block already has Rashad Port as probably the strongest card. Do we really need to do Rashad Port version 2?
How much wasted potential is there in that design?
You could make a
Like
a rare land that does anything. Anything at all.
So I guess I think of the wasted potential in terms of there was something here that there was a real need for.
Make a Mystic.
I don't know that there's a need for a Wintermoon Mesa. You could just literally cut it from the set and nobody would ever notice.
Make a Ristic Mazavith. You could do something here that would be useful. It's so bad. I think
it is. It's a blank. It's a blank spot.
This would not be my answer if it was if the block didn't have Rashad Port, because another problem that this set has is just it's really weak and unappealing, even in comparison to Mercadian Masques. And Wintermoon Mesa is a thing that you can point at where it's like, I'm not just imagining that this set is a lot weaker. This was a rare from 2 sets ago, and now it's a rare here, and it's so much worse.
How about Evolving Wilds? What if Wintermoon Mesa was Evolving Wilds?
It was so good. Make it a rare. It could have been a rare. It could have been a rare at that time.
Could have been.
Sensibilities around mana fixing.
Yeah, mine was Bog Glider, and it feels almost like cheating because also that was like the for this is like 3 sets in a row where Mercenaries is the failing, but like I think Bog Glider is a weird one to call the failing because it's the one I like, but it is emblematic of why I think there was wasted potential. Because I think that there is something to sacrifice a land to go get your Mercenaries instead of just more pay mana.
Yeah.
And converting a resource into another resource, netting a mana. Like it's one thing to be just cheating on a card, but to cheat on a card and mana. And Bog Glider actually has some gameplay to it. Because I think that when you have a 1/1 flyer, already the game piece can be played differently than just my random little tome. But also, on a bunch of these cards, you either have the mana or you don't, right? Mm-hmm. But this card, you do have the mana. The question is whether you sacrifice a land or not.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to sacrifice a land, you can profitably just be getting in there. I think that there could have been some cool stuff with a bunch of mercenaries that are not inevitable. Because I think that the idea of the chain just progresses inevitably is worn out by this point.
Yeah.
And there is some fun to, like, you could have had a mercenary that you have to pay 4 life to do, or 3 life, or whatever.
Yeah.
You could have a mercenary that you have to discard 2 cards. You could have whatever it is. You could have a mercenary where you have to sacrifice a creature and you're getting a creature that costs 1 more. Like there's a lot of fun.
There is, yeah. No,
I think that you could have had a lot of fun with mercenaries that you have to like mean it.
I'll give you a nod. That's better than my answer. I do still despise Winter Moon Mesa.
Of course, Winter Moon Mesa is offensive. At least Bog Glider, they just didn't think of it.
Yeah.
Winter Moon Mesa is worse than phoning it in.
Right. And then
Winter Moon Mesa reeks of cowardice.
Yes.
It's it was like there was a, and keep in mind, obviously this is totally unfair. There's probably meta considerations and it's weird designing a game with a company and deadlines, but there was both cowardice with regards to the actual implementation, but also cowardice in not changing it. Somebody was like trying to compromise and somebody else is like, this is what we're doing. And they, instead of fixing it or making it good, just solve it by making it horrendous and just taking up a rare spot that's so unappealing, so unattractive. And at the same time, there's no courage to actually have this have any remote appeal to anybody for any context. Like it's just, it is cowardice.
Well, on a brighter note, lastly, what's your favorite card in the set?
So it's Withdraw.
Great answer.
I think that if you're going to do this sort of a thing, first of all, Withdraw is already in the camp of it still does something.
Mm-hmm.
Second, there's a lot of gameplay to these as instants. And this one in particular, it's very interesting because you can't just do it when they're tapped out. You really want to do it at the moment you want to do it, making it interesting whether or not they have the mana. But also the fact that you can do it to your own creature and not pay so that you can turn the downside into upside is awesome.
Yeah.
It is awesome. And I think that if you're going to do this sort of a thing, I wish there was more of this Withdraw stuff. But I had so much fun playing with this, and it leads to lots of great moments.
Yeah. It's a really dynamic card for like not only the act of it getting played and what happens, but all the moments leading up to it.
Yes.
Like when that card's on your radar, the game takes a particular shape that isn't the same one over and over again.
Totally.
I'm going to give it to Jolreal, Empress of Beasts. I have a lot of fondness for this cycle, and in some respects wish that these cards were generally stronger just for a variety of reasons. And this to me is, in my opinion, the best design of the 5 because it's just a lot more, in my opinion, a lot more dynamic than a lot of the way the other ones play out.
Yeah, it's the most, like, it's the most fun of a dimension to add.
Yeah. But, kind of slim pickings. Anyway, that does it for the awards. We'll be back in a moment with our final grades. Okay, scoreboard time. Shaben, what's your grade?
F. I don't know. It depends. If I can't. It's so hard to justify giving it a D minus. Probably a D. Because the problem is, if you don't give this an F, what are you ever going to give an F besides Homelands? It depends. I did have some fun, and it didn't ruin things. So maybe it's a. But what's the exact thing we're grading?
It's open to interpretation.
I want to hear your argument because I'm trying to decide between D minus and F.
I'm giving it an F. And the reason for it was my experience. I set aside like the mechanics are really, really rough and there's so much unappealing stuff and the file's really repetitive in a lot of places. Like all that's really, really bad. But I also just remember specifically for me at the time of, I'm getting into Magic more and more. I'm getting into tournament Magic. And there's this, you have the Band-Aid ripped off with Mercadian Masques, but you accept that, what was happening with Saga and Tempest Block, even though I wasn't a game designer, it was you could still feel like this can't go on like this forever. So, you take your medicine, and then Nemesis comes out, and it's like, oh, wow. It's like, this set's certainly weaker than Urza's Legacy or Tempest or whatever. There's a lot of cool stuff going on here. It's like things to think about. Okay. All right. Great. And then this comes out, and there's nothing. The most valuable rare for tournament play in this set was Troublesome Spirit. That's like unfathomable, right? So for me, it was so much worse than Mercadian Masques in terms of like, is this the game I had to play for the next 5 years? This is like not tolerable. This is so boring and bad, and it's not even like, at least Ice Age and Homeland, some of these sets, there's this plausible deniability of, well, they just kind of don't know better, and I'm still learning. But now we're here where it's the same company that made Saga Block. It's the same company that made Nemesis. I can't believe this is on purpose.
So the reason I think that I'm sold and that it's definitely an F is because when I think, like, when you were talking about the experience of just how boring it was and everything like that, when I think back to where I was, not just the first time I played with the Exodus cards, or the first time I played with the Prophecy cards, but what did I do in the next 3 months? This was the point at which I stopped. It was the first time in my life that I just skipped the Pro Tour.
Yeah.
Like, I was qualified for everything all the time, but I was so uninspired that I didn't even bother to show up.
And that's unthinkable.
It was unthinkable at the time. If you would have asked me 6 months earlier, would you ever, it just seems so unthinkable.
Right.
And I mean, Mercadian Mask was already rough, but it was like, I'll ride it out.
Yes.
And the Nemesis was like not great, but it was better than Mask. It didn't solve all the issues, but at least it gave me some more hope that it was like, we're going to go in a direction. Prophecy was so uninteresting to continue to think about, literally the first month that it even existed, that I didn't even bother to go.
Yeah.
And so I think it is an F.
Well, that's the first time our grades have aligned, our letter grades have aligned here, and it is an F. Pretty rough stuff. But surprisingly, a lot to talk about here. Like, there's some cool cards, really compelling design lessons to take from this.
Absolutely.
So that does it for this episode of Prophecy. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. If you're interested, you can head over to patreon.com/resleevables to sign up for our Patreon, which gives you access to things like the Unsleep podcast that Chab and I do here every week, and Cracker Pack videos and early access and all that kind of stuff. Thank you to our sponsor, Tales of Adventure, toamagic.com, promo code Resleevables at checkout for 5% off all of your orders. Thank you to Dragon Shield, dragonshield.com, and promo code Resleevables, all lowercase, case sensitive, for 5% off all your orders. And to Bosch and Roll, Brian Koval's YouTube channel. That does it for this block. And we start entering some really, really fun territory coming up here. The first block that I can say I fell in love with. Yeah. The first block where I actually went to a Pro Tour to hang out and watch and see people, like you and Finkel and Kai just, roaming around the halls, and some fun Magic. We're going to be up to Invasion next, and I can't wait.
All-time banger.
All-time banger. Till next time. Test. Sorry, give me one more. Test.
One more test.
Test.
One more time.
Okay.
Oh shit, this is going to be a great clip. If I get hit by a train or my plane crashes, like in the next, at some point this year, you can like use this little.
I really think we could come up with something better.
I mean, I'm assuming it'll be a long montage.
Your phone on airplane?
Yes. Now.
All right, great. A little bit.
Are you enough in the... Okay, there you go.
Well...
I mean, it's whatever you're into. I just figured, you got a beautiful face, man.
All right. Just powering through this one.